Access presented by WALLIX. My name is Chad Carter, and I'm joined by the head of our pre-sales engineering, Grant Burst. So first, I want to go over the agenda, talk a little bit about what the webinar is the purpose for. The vulnerabilities linked to the increased use of remote access that facilitates the work of both the employee and the external provider is kind of the gist of what we want to get across, and the importance of securing those remote workers. The first part is the risks and challenges of remote access. As we've all come to realize, this is part of our current circumstances of the new norm. Companies were woefully underprepared for the rapid increase in remote workers and providers. Then I'm going to present the technologies which can help address the risks and offer a comprehensive end-to-end for your security strategies. And the third piece, to illustrate these concepts, I will review a case study of a global aerospace manufacturer, but because of NDAs and security reasons, we can't name them. And then the third piece of it will be a brief technical demo of the WALLIX solutions to articulate the different technologies necessary to protect your remote access and increase your overall security posture. So, no webinar is complete without, I like to call, the scary statistics slide. Now, the reason all presentations have one of these is to articulate the dangers before going over the solution. And these are very real threats. I mean, just look at that first piece. We're not talking about breaches with 327 attacks every minute. We're not talking about breaches. These are attacks that are testing you to find weaknesses in your defenses. Not all of them are high-tech hacks like Hollywood makes them out to be. Some can be as simple as, a phishing email. The point is, they want your sensitive data, or worst case, cause harm. I mean, look at all the different verticals that are attending the webinar: finance, bank, healthcare, manufacturing. Now, finance, banks, or financial services, and healthcare, they have valuable customer data, social security numbers, investor portfolios, things like that. But manufacturing and also in the healthcare, they have other things like cranes, machine presses, RX and insulin, RX dispensaries, insulin pumps. So there's a lot of different things that they can go after. They're not always looking for malicious attacks, but they're looking to try to do something that you don't want them to do. So trying to find a balance. Credential security is the Achilles heel. I mean, this is really one of the biggest things, is trying to figure out what you're going to do and how you're going to monitor these credentials. It's, the 3 of the 4 biggest attacks that represent failures are your IAM practices, stolen credentials, as I mentioned before, phishing emails, and privilege abuse. That could relate to or talk about the internal threat as well. So here's a really scary statistic: is privileged accounts are the root most cyber attacks. So 92% of all of these attacks, or all of these people, what they're looking for is they're attacking the privileged user, because the everyday user doesn't have access typically to the information that they're looking for, but the privileged user does. So old security solutions are now obsolete. We know it's just not the way to do things anymore. And the problem is, and we'll get into it later, that the IT staff is getting asked to do more with less. And so the more projects they give you, it seems, oh, well, we have an order, we have an SAP, we have this, we have that. So security kind of seems to take a back seat, but that should be the cornerstone of every project that you do, is how is this going to affect our security? So the biggest challenges of remote access is productivity versus security. So one of the things is, if you make it, finding a balance. If you make it too difficult to use, employees will find a way not to use it. Connecting from anywhere. So when we allow employees in pre-existing contracts to connect from wherever they are, that connection from an external network where they use their laptop, they need access to the target equipment quickly and easily. But how do you make sure that that person connecting is who they say they are, and they're going to do what they're supposed to do? So this brings us to the three main questions of what you protect and how we get to do it. I mean, the bottom piece of this first, before I jump into that, is I think one of the biggest challenges that we face is allowing the use of personal laptops, applications, what's on somebody's home computer. Basically, when it was the BOYD back a few years ago, help desks are being overwhelmed. You guys can't keep up with the demand of trying to monitor people's private computers that you never had access before. You haven't had to be able to harden these things before they were brought online. So the biggest challenges of remote access is you're carrying on with the tasks. That gets you to the rights management piece. Connect from anywhere. These are all the pieces that help you solve these issues. Being able to connect from anywhere, managing those connections externally. That's why having that remote access is important. Connect easily and quickly. Here's the VPNs. They're very complex and they're set up for large networks. This is an issue. If you don't have control over those, that leads to that fourth piece. Help desk gets overwhelmed. You can't do both. Having control over everything plus having the VPN, it gets very cumbersome very quickly. So how do we do this? To address the issue of securing remote access from end to end, we have to cover three main issues. One, identity management. That consists of setting up federation of identities, contextual authentication, SSO and MFA centralization, consolidation directories, and password management, which is extremely important, making sure that the passwords are rotated and changed as needed. Now, historically, IAM solutions made it possible to meet this need, but 2010s, we got IDaaS, or Identity as a Service, typically available in the cloud or software as a service, and therefore more flexible and easy to put into place as opposed to the traditional on-premise IAM solutions. Then we need to look at access control. In my opinion, this is probably one of the biggest pieces that we're looking at, for the simple reason that access control is managing those endpoints, managing who has access to what. So being able to know that is kind of the cornerstone of what we're talking about. But what is the access control, and what do we mean by privileged access? It's a reminder of what account user with privileges, admin rights, applications, or critical equipment. For example, when the member of an IT team has to work on a server, or an external service provider is working on equipment to perform remote maintenance, as well as we'll see that as in our illustrated case in a few. Privileged access security includes privilege management, including the granting and revoking of monitoring, audit and traceability. These are extremely important. What happened on those systems? Who did what, when, and why? Credential management, including password criteria enforcement and rotation, stopping lateral moves, bouncing across network resources. Now, this is really important when it comes to what we're discussing is, if people remember the Target hack a few years back, it's getting older and older, but it's a perfect example specifically when it comes to lateral moves, because you're discussing when it wasn't the Target got hacked, it was that their HVAC control company got hacked. And so when they logged into the Target network, it showed them all these no, but then yes to the HVAC controls. Why did they need to see everything else? If you're really controlling remote access, the only thing, we're talking about least privilege, the only thing they should have seen was the HVAC controls. So that would have prevented those lateral moves. Now, securing hybrid environments. This is extremely important, especially when we're talking about the financial sector. I know some banks still have ATM backbones. A lot of their backbone and their infrastructure is based on technology and companies that went out of business decades ago. So how do you keep that running? You have to hire a lot more outside programmers, outside contractors, duct tape. I've seen it all when it comes to trying to keep these machines together. So having a product that can work in your hybrid environment is extremely important. And privileged access management and PEDM does that. And PAM, well, and technically now, Gartner's recently starting to call it privileged access and session management, because one of the major aspects of this technology resides in the session management, namely session recording, 4i mode, automatic session termination. So, for example, if somebody is logging, the HVAC guy, the HVAC team was logged in to those controls, even if they can't see anything else because you have restricted their access, you can watch with the session management or session monitoring exactly what they're doing when they're doing it. So if something goes wrong, you can immediately, you can have things in place or controls in place that will terminate it automatically. But if you're watching them, you can easily manipulate and control what they're doing by shutting it down before things actually get out of control. So some of the PAM solutions and the functionalities, so basically privilege elevation delegation management, it's founded on the principle of least privilege. So you can elevate remotely and delegate those privileges to somebody who may not have them when they need them if they're not available. And of course, we can't talk about securing remote access without talking about what the problem. That's the endpoints, the workstations. So that's kind of one of the biggest points that we want to talk about. The privilege elevation on demand, that goes back a little bit to the PEDM. Perimeter security. We go about your firewalls and antivirus, things like that. That's more or less on the perimeter security piece. And eliminating local rights. The problem is, employees working remotely need to be able to work from their workstations, whether a corporate provided laptop or a personal machine from an external network. But how do we make sure that they can do their jobs with the proper access rights without putting the corporate network at risk? To do this, an EPM solution has to be implemented, which takes the principles of least privilege and even better at more granular levels of control. EPM enables you the privilege escalation on request, that perimeter security, and complete removal of the local admin rights. It also allows you to go beyond securing critical assets, but available to all of your IT. The EPM allows you to protect the user data against mutation threats, cryptographic lockers, things like that. But it also protects systems from the malicious users who try to corrupt the process of the applications. So, how does it all work together? You have a remote employee. So EPM, this is where it starts, is being able to secure their state with the endpoint management protection. This is a typical employee on his workstation. We've installed an agent to help. He will connect to his company's portal with the unique username, password, SSO, to access a dashboard on which he will see the business applications to which he has access. Some will be common to all employees, other will be significantly or specifically available to him based on his permissions. This is possible thanks to the IDaaS solution, okay, which is linked to the Active Directory of the organization. It certifies the identity of the user before allowing them access to one or more of the applications. Then, if the user has privileges, he will go through a bastion. It's invisible to him to access the critical equipment which he has access to. So, if the user does not have privileges on this equipment, he will not have access to it. He won't even see it. So this is the piece we go back to about the lateral moves. Even if he can guess it's there, it doesn't matter. He can't see it. But thanks to PEDM, he can be granted elevation of privileges upon request to give him temporary access to that critical equipment. and thanks to the PEDM agents we've installed on the affected Windows targets. Finally, external service providers arrive, and they'll be able to connect remotely to work on critical equipment via a web interface linked to the Bastion. Thanks to an approval workflow system, possibility of, to limit their action, the time slot of the monitoring, tracing their activities. So you can set parameters on when they're allowed to work on the network. So if you have third-party contractors and they're working, on your networks at 3 a.m, why? You've only designated them to work from 8 to 5. So those are the types of things that you can put in place. So PAM, Privileged Access Management, or Privileged Access and Session Management, is at the heart of securing your remote access. I'm going to take a look at these technologies for the ideal scenario to protect sensitive IT infrastructure. Realistically, however, limits due to budget and IT bandwidth, it sometimes forces you to prioritize projects, especially when it is necessary to act quickly due to exceptional circumstances. And like I said before, you guys are being asked to do more with less and less resources all the time. So in that case, when forced to choose, you start with the biggest game changer, securing remote access with Privileged Access Management. Why start with PAM? Because it's a core foundation for which you will build your security infrastructure. PAM allows you to protect your most sensitive assets first, to protect what we call the crown jewels. As I mentioned earlier, 92% of the attacks target privileged accounts. By implementing a PAM solution, you'll be able to significantly reduce the attack surface with minimal investment. You can build around PAM by adding layers of security with EPM and IDaaS solutions. PAM is a much better alternative to traditional tools such as VPNs and enabling remote access. As I mentioned before, VPNs are expensive. They're complicated to set up, especially for large, diverse workforces, the likes of which we've never seen before, creating a huge amount of extra work for the IT team. They also don't offer any visibility whatsoever to a user what the user's doing once they've connected. So how do you know once they connect to the network, what are they doing? Simpler, less expensive to set up. PAM offers a better user experience. It includes complete traceability that goes back to the S in the PASM is a session management. It includes complete traceability and oversight of the privileged activity, which is what you need, that records an audit trail of actions taken on the sensitive assets. In the event of an incident, being able to trace back who did what and when is essential to act as quickly as possible. Just to use a real-world, incident, if the email services go out on the C-level, the exec level floor, heads are going to roll. What happened? Oh no, let's break out the backups. Call Iron Mountain. We've had a breach. Or you can go back and check the session of what happened in the last half an hour on that machine that caused this to happen. Oh, our user fat fingered a DNS entry. Couple clicks of a button, you have it fixed. It's up and running. So there's no need to panic. So a little bit about WALLIX and our holistic cybersecurity approach. WALLIX offers a portfolio of solutions which enables us an end-to-end approach to securing remote access. At WALLIX, we offer a suite of cybersecurity solutions to address every step of your security strategy. Securing privileged access with a robust privileged access management solution, protecting the endpoints, and an innovative endpoint management or EPM solution, and securing identities with the IDaaS and the MFA that we mentioned earlier. And the use case we're about to look at, we're going to focus in particular on the Bastion, WALLIX's cornerstone PAM solution and its Access Manager module. As we said before, the Access Manager facilitates remote access and offers a simple and fast alternative to VPNs. This module is used by a global aerospace manufacturer to secure access to sensitive equipment at its production sites around the world. This goes back earlier to one of the things that I said about hackers when they're looking towards taking control of industry. So this is a great example of how we do that. So why a global aerospace manufacturer uses PAM? Okay, so the situation was they have manufacturing centers across the globe with complex default workflows and manufacturing parts. They have large machine presses, and a lot of these machines they're very specific to what they're trying to do, and they have the calibration that has to be exact. So their IT staff doesn't have the capacity to manage all of these on a daily basis. And some of these machines are so complex, you need a third-party certified engineer from the manufacturer to be able to do this. Now, it doesn't always make sense to come on site, but they required external support engineers for a lot of these machines. So deploying the Bastion, we deployed it in the cloud infrastructure. That's one of the best things about the Bastion is it can be deployed on premise, in the cloud. We don't care what, AWS, virtual. We even have some customers, some specific manufacturing customers that have deployed tin box, had the metal box. They needed it on site just because they didn't have staff enough to be able to install things. But the size of this company allowed them to install it in the cloud. So it gave their critical shop floors across 11 different manufacturing sites. They're connected all to redundant bastions. So any of the external users having to go through there, they can monitor everything that they do, they can record everything that they can do, but more importantly, they control that access. Okay, so nobody gets in that's not allowed. It's all about the least privilege. So that's what I want to really get across about privileged access and session management. It's not about just keeping people out, but it's also watching what they do. Because if you think about the size of the pieces, and it's an aircraft manufacturer, the size of the things and the projects that they complete. If some of these things are off by a micrometer, millions of dollars of inventory could be lost. So having that extra layer of audit and traceability is extremely important. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to the technical portion of it, to Grant Burst.
Thanks a lot for that, Chad. So the purpose of this demonstration is to focus primarily on remote access. So we're going to be looking at how users can connect from home, remote systems, remote access for contractors, whatever it takes. And I'm going to be focusing primarily on the Bastion and on the Access Manager. So first of all, I'm just going to log into the Bastion as the administrator. And we can see from here, pretty much everything the admin needs is there. There's session management, password management, authorizations, targets, users, everything. If I log in as a user, and in this case, I'm going to log in as myself, all I have is my authorizations. I've authenticated to the Bastion using local username and password in this case, but it could be two-factor, multi-factor, it could be LDAP, whatever you need. From here, I can fire a session off from my desktop. And I'm just going to open up an SSH connection here. Unfortunately, it's opened up on my screen. And there you go. I've got a one-time password and I've authenticated. If we go to audit, sessions here show that Grant is connected from 10.1 as super user on this Linux box. And I can view the session in real time. So anything I do is being monitored and recorded. So I'm going to CD to Etsy. And we see everything I see is being monitored. I'm going to disconnect out of there and come out. So that's me connecting from the office. Typical environment, I'm here, I'm able to connect straight through. No VPNs, nothing like that whatsoever. But what if I'm working from home? Well, if I have a VPN, I can use my own tools. I can just open up an RDP session, for instance, point it to the Bastion, authenticate, and be presented with the sessions that I'm authorized to connect onto. For instance, this Windows 2012 box. But this is if I have a direct connection via a VPN or similar. I'll just wait for this to log in. And I'll quickly just log out. So obviously able to connect using my own tools or the Bastion directly. If I do not have access to a VPN or similar, it's not a problem. What we have is our Access Manager. Now the Access Manager is accessed purely via HTTPS. In this case, as you can see, I'm using port 11443. Use whichever port you want. The idea being that there's just one port to open through the firewall. It's HTTPS, so it's secured. I'm going to authenticate. In fact, I'm going to use Chad, and Chad's going to authenticate with his LDAP credentials. Oop. Maybe he's changed his password. So he's now authenticated to the Access Manager. The Access Manager has used an API to connect to the Bastion and pull his authorizations. So in this case, Chad wants to connect onto super user account on this Linux box. And there he is. He's authenticated. The session is still coming through the Bastion, and we're still able to monitor and record everything he does. It's going to CD to Etsy. And if we move it over a little bit, we can see again everything that he does. And he's going to run an LS. And we see in color what Chad sees. Now, one of the rules I put in place on the Bastion is to block Chad from being able to elevate his permission on this box. And if we go to our session management and look at SSH, we can see no other rules in place. Everything is just clean. I'm not doing anything as a global rule. However, if I look at the group policy, Chad is in the the help desk group. I put in that he's blocked for sudo, reboot, and secret. So what happens if he tries to elevate his rights? It's blocked, unauthorized pattern. One attempt left. And unauthorized pattern, session is being closed. If we look at the audit for the session history, we can see straight away, I get it large enough, the Chad was blocked and kill pattern restricted sudo. So we can put controls in for groups. We can put controls on the major target systems themselves as well. But what about if I have a third party? Well, I've created a user called John. I've just made this a local user on the Bastion. John works for WatchGuard. I've given him an expiration, which runs out in 10 minutes. I need him to just be able to check a firewall for me. I put him into the group third party, and I've created an authorization for third parties to connect to the WatchGuard firewall. So John comes along. I give him the access to the Access Manager only. I give him local password, which he can change. And John now has access via the Access Manager. So again, I only need to give him one IP address to be able to connect through. I don't give him the passwords to the WatchGuard box. I don't have to give him the IP address even for the WatchGuard. From here, he just fires off the connection. The connection is going to go via one of my servers. In this case, it's the 2008 box. John agrees to be bound by the security policy and understands that he could be recorded and monitored. And the Bastion is going to launch, in this case, I believe Chrome, and fire off the details to connect onto the WatchGuard firewall. There it is. It's injected the username and the password, and John is now connected. Again, if we go to our audit and current sessions, John is connected as admin, local account on this WatchGuard firewall. And anything he does is now being monitored and recorded. So that's me using just a basic username or connection to get onto the Access Manager. What if I want to go a little bit deeper? Well, as Chad was mentioning earlier, we have our federated identity and we also have best safe. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to log out of here as John, and I'm going to log in as myself. So again, I can connect also through the Access Manager, not necessarily only through my own tools. I'm going to jump onto this Windows 2012 box once more. I'm going to agree to be bound by the policy. And the Bastion is authenticating me, in this case, as the domain admin. So I have full rights on this box. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to run a command prompt. It's been blocked. It's been blocked by the Bastion, and it's been blocked without an agent. The Bastion itself is 100% agentless. But on my RDP rules, I've created, unlike on my SSH, some global rules. I've denied command prompt and I've denied task manager. I've also said I'm going to allow anything out on the 192.168.10 network for RDP and block any other connection. So let's see that work. Just going to open up a remote desktop. I'm going to try to connect to 10.130. And as you can see, I've managed to make a connection. Now, if we look at the audit in current sessions, I'm still showing as connected to the Windows 2012 box. However, the recording is showing me on the new box. And that again is because we're not agentless, we're actually recording the session, not the desktop. Disconnect and I'm back. If I try to connect to a different network, one which hasn't been allowed, so let's go for the 108 network, we can see straight away it's been interrupted and blocked. So again, this is 100% agentless. Now, when we look at the best safe, so the idea of using PDM with this so that we can elevate the privilege or de-elevate or delegate responsibility, whatever we're going to do on here, we're using an agent. Now, the best safe is for endpoints primarily. I'm running it on the server just for demos as such. But the idea being that the user can be given access to their system, whether it's a laptop, a PC, with only user rights. But we're able to elevate those rights to administrator if we like. In this case, though, I've logged in as the domain admin, and I can restrict the rights that I have on here. So for instance, I'm only using blocked and restricted, but I could use local system bypass normal. The idea being that if it was a local user, I could give them administrator rights to specific applications. Now, in this case, I've blocked top secret. I've blocked access to the host file, and I've blocked access to, I don't remember what this one is. Let's have a quick look. A file called Boris as well. I've also restricted Firefox, and I've restricted the LOL file. So I can open up LOL, but I can't put it into a protected folder. So I can choose folders that I want to protect and stop files being added to them or changed, etc. So let's see how some of this works. Well, let's have a look at LOL. There it is. Just opens up as normal, but I can't save it to anywhere that's restricted. Let's have a look at top secret. In this case, it's been blocked, and it's been blocked by the best safe tool. So this doesn't have to be controlled by the session manager. This is controlled by the desktop itself. Firefox, on the other hand, all I've said is the restriction is show a warning. Are you sure you want to make this connection, etc. works very, very well. What we also have with this connection, oh, sorry, with the best safe, we just abandon this, there we go, is anti-malware. So in this case, sorry, not anti-malware, we're actually talking a little bit deeper than that. We're actually talking about controlling ransomware in the malware side of things. So I've created a rule here, and if we look at the rule and the conditions, I've said, sorry, conditions, if the process tries to make 3 or more encryption operations within a second, which is very typical, normally it'd be a much, much higher number than that, block it. Now, not only are we blocking these credentials and these files, we're also grabbing the keys in some cases as well, so that if somebody does get infected within the network, we may well actually have the encryption key. Now, I actually happen to have WannaCry available on here, and this is truly WannaCry. I'm going to launch it, and there we go, it's been blocked. Encryption thresholds have been reached. So my system is safe. I don't have to worry about any ransomware demands, etc. We're all good. Now, I'm going to go back to the Bastion and how we can actually lock down systems even more. Now, if you remember, I put in a rule saying secret for the help desk, saying that they weren't allowed to open anything called secret. Now, in this case, I've got a folder called secret. It's got some files in there, and I can open those files up as much as I like without any problems. However, if I log out of here, and disconnect, and I'm going to sign out, and I'm going to log in as Chad. Now, as we know, Chad is in a different group to me. But Chad also has connection to the 2012 box as the domain admin. Now, for Chad to connect in, he has to ask for approval. He doesn't have just standard access to it. So he wants 10 minutes access. Oh, 110, I just want 10 minutes. He has a ticket reference, it's 123, and he's feeling very, very confident. He wants to rebuild LDAP. And he's going to send this validation through. Now, when it comes to authorizations, it can be manual, it can be automatic, or it can go to a ticketing system. Something similar to, say, Remedy, ServiceNow, ConnectWise, whatever you have. In this case, I'll have an email pop through. There it is, just a notification for me, telling me that Chad needs connection. I'm going to say OK and approve. Now, I've got a quorum of 1. We could have it as multiple quorums depending on who, what, where, and why. So it's been approved. Chad reopens the connection. He agrees to be bound by the policy, and he's told that he only has 10 minutes before the session will be disconnected. He only asked for 10 minutes, so he understands that. So Chad is also logging in as the domain admin. So full admin rights on this box, apart from, as we already know, he can't run command prompt and he can't run the task manager, etc. But everything else should be good. So he goes to the secret file and he goes to open up a folder, and what happens is he's disconnected. So not only have we disconnected him or blocked him, we've disconnected the session altogether, we've sent a notification through, and there is a warning sent. So again, if we go to audit, session history, we can see straight away that Chad was blocked. Now, all of these recordings can be replayed, they can be downloaded, they can be put into files for maybe change request or for troubleshooting, etc. But what we can see is the size. Now, these files are very, very small. So in this one, for 5 minutes, is only 1.2 meg. So our encryption is incredibly good. Sorry, encryption, our compression and encryption is very, very good as well. We use AES 256, etc. But the compression means that the size of the files is very, very small. So we have the Bastion, we have the Access Manager, and we have the ability to use different formats of authentication. So talking about different formats of authentication, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go incognito so I can use the same browser. I'm going to log on to TrustLM. Now, TrustLM is federated identity. I'm going to log in as Grant. Actually, sorry, it's gburst, I believe, at wallix.local. Yep. And authenticate with my username and password. And I'm now presented with what I'm authorized to connect onto, one of which is the Access Manager. I'm going to click on here, and the TrustLM Authenticator is saying I need an extra layer of authentication. So I'm going to use my application on my phone. I'm going to send it. It's come through to my phone. I'm going to authorize it from here using my biometrics, and it's now authenticated me straight to the Access Manager. I have no need to actually authenticate myself on the Access Manager. The TrustLM is doing this. So that's multi-factor federated identity without the need for a VPN, just using HTTPS connection straight through and a cloud identity provider. And that is it. That's the Bastion. That's remote access. Very, very simple to use, very, very simple to set up. If you have a user suddenly needs to connect on remotely, they don't normally do it, we can either already have them in an LDAP group or set them up with a local account in the same way as for a third party.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from, and welcome.
So we're going to open up to any questions. Been looking at the questions here, and I'm not seeing any that have been put through. If you do have any, we've still got about 10 minutes available. Okay, we've got one question here regarding the Bastion. Does it have to work with all the other systems to cover the whole of security? Well, it's entirely up to you as to what you need. Do you need just the Bastion to provide the session and password management? Then that's all you need. Do you need Best Safe to protect your endpoints? If you don't need the session side, then again, that's all you need. We're very modular in our control. We have a number of customers that are currently using the Bastion and the endpoint, which gives us the full PDM solution. Now, whether or not you need the full spectrum is entirely down to your organization. If you have users that are connecting in locally onto systems, especially laptops, etc., then it's best to have both the Bastion and the Best Safe together.
Yes, we do have, this is Chad, we do have contacts in India. We certainly can get you contacted with the right associates in that region. I don't know if my contact information went up there, but if you want to send an email to C. Carter, that's CCARTER at wallix.com, I will get you pointed in the right direction. Any other questions, technical or sales wise? Okay, Grant, do you have anything to add?
No, I think we've covered pretty much everything on there. Obviously, if anyone does want to go down the route of a one-to-one demonstration, please do not hesitate to contact either Chad or myself. Be more than happy to do a presentation and, if necessary, a POC.
Thank you all for your time today and enjoy the rest of the day.